I am stating very seriously, and this is not an overstatement, that I picked the cotton, and I carried it to market, and I built the railroads under someone else's whip for nothing. For nothing. The Southern oligarchy, which has until today so much power in Washington, and therefore some power in the world, was created by my labor and my sweat, and the violation of my women and the murder of my children. This, in the land of the free and the home of the brave.
They would see a lot of the statues in the suits with the king, with their hands with their right hand. See, sometimes you see them like this, Wakanda. But you also see it like this. So let's deal with the ancestors. Right, oh ancestors. Repeat after me. Blacker than 1,000 midnights.
Blacker than 1,000 midnights.
African ancestors.
African ancestors.
It is to you that we, your children, give respect and honor.
It is to you that we, your children, give respect and honor.
O ancestors,
O ancestors,
we call upon you and welcome you in this place.
we call upon you and welcome you in this place.
Let your presence fill this place.
Let your presence fill this place.
O ancestors,
O ancestors,
who have been purposely excluded from the history books,
who have been purposely excluded from the history books,
so that the world will not know of your greatness.
so the world will not know of your greatness.
O ancestors,
O ancestors,
who gave civilization to the world,
who gave civilization to the world,
who gave the arts to the world,
who gave arts to the world,
who gave music to the world,
who gave music to the world,
who gave sciences to the world.
who gave science to the world.
O ancestors,
O ancestors,
who gave mathematics to the world,
who gave mathematics to the world,
our African ancestors,
our African ancestors,
who gave medicine to the world,
who gave medicine to the world,
who gave literature to the world,
who gave literature to the world,
our African ancestors,
our African ancestors,
who gave philosophy to the
who
world,
gave philosophy to the world,
our African ancestors,
our ancestors,
who gave God consciousness to the world.
who gave God consciousness.
O ancestors,
O ancestors,
we thank you for devoting your life to make a future for us,
we thank you for devoting your
our
life
children,
to us,
grandchildren,
your children,
and great-grandchildren.
grandchildren.
Now stand with us,
Now stand with us,
strengthen us,
strengthen us,
guide us,
guide us,
teach us,
teach us,
and protect us from the snares of our enemies.
and protect us from the snares of our enemies.
Rise up, O African ancestors,
Rise up, O Africans,
and let our enemies be scattered,
let our enemies be scattered,
and give us the wisdom and the boldness to deal with our oppressors,
and give us wisdom and boldness to deal with our oppressors,
and those who would hinder the liberation and empowerment of our people.
and those who do the research and power.
Rise up, O African ancestors,
Rise up, O Africans,
and live in us,
and live in us.
and we will not fail to honor you.
We will not fail to honor you.
We will not fail to respect you.
We will not fail to
We
respect
will
you.
not fail to hear you.
We will not fail to
And
hear
we
you.
will not betray you.
We will not betray you.
Ashe,
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 Ashe.
Ashe.
It is done. Thank you. It's like sorry for that. I didn't get a chance to go through this in the screen. We appreciate the inclusion and power and energy that everyone that's supposed to be something that makes us up in these schools. Okay. I'm filling in for another comrade present. But I want to again extend my welcome to everybody. I hope you were able to arrive without any mishaps. Again, it's my belief, having done this work for far too long to mention, but there's nothing greater that we as African people can do than to forward our struggle for liberation. As quiet as it's kept, that we get to fulfill that. We get to fulfill that long aspiration of ours for total freedom and liberation from the clutches of oppression and tyranny. And it's quite obvious right now with this clown that you guys elected, or somebody elected. I take that back. I know you don't elect. But yes, that the world is under attack. And if we look at our history, that we've always saved the world. I was at an event last week, and they were talking about the education system and what can be done to make it better for our children. And the brother made a startling comment, perhaps it passed over the head to some folks, but that if we demand quality education and when we get it, everybody's going to benefit from it. And not just that, it was my belief that they will scamper towards wherever we're being educated, whatever institutions we have. And if you can look at our historical black colleges, that going from historical black college, Professor Winbush will attest to that we have in many instances more white people in some of these classes, not because they get a cheaper education, but they get the far superior education. And we know that by the instructors that are in these institutions. So the world, this government would benefit from giving our schools what was promised during the civil rights era, giving us equal and quality education. But once we get that, we're going to become the leader, because whenever we establish institutions, they predominate. That's just something in us. So the world, they don't have to fear that we're going to take something from them. That we're going to add something to it. So welcome here on behalf of Sons of the Awakened. Akila. You guys were given some slips of paper here, and Akila will give some clarification as to what these pieces of paper are.
Welcome, thank you for all for coming. So underneath your seats we have, we handed them to you. So we passed out a set of questions to each of you regarding reparations. So we would like to know more about what your knowledge on reparations is. But we're not going to ask you right now to answer those questions. A lot of those questions will be answered by Dr. Winbush. So just keep those questions in mind as he's presenting.
I want this to be a scholastic endeavor, but the questions that you were given, so as Akila said, will be revealed, the answers will be revealed in this discussion today. The reparations, for those who aren't aware, means to repair. Repair for injuries, the harms and damages that have been done, in our case, to us as African people. And I use the term African. Many of us have heard the wisdom of Malcolm X, that you can take a chick and put it in an incubator, and when those chicks hatch, it's not a ham, it's still a chick. Well, that applies to us still. They take a dog like a German Shepherd. They don't call them German American Shepherds anymore. They don't call them French American Poodles. They maintain their bloodline, and our bloodline is still intact. Because you can't go any place in this world and find people that look like us. Now we come in all different hues and complexes and all, but that blood that runs through us goes all the way back to day one, when man first set foot in Eastern Africa, sometimes referred as Uganda, various parts of East Africa, is where they say that the first people in the world lived there. So they are our ancestors. But over and over again, as a result of this, during our enslavement, we were looked upon as chattel, as property that somebody owned, somebody took possession of, somebody changed their name, and told them what to do and when to do it against their will. So reparations is a result of all these damages that occurred to us then and that still follow us now. Because the vestiges of slavery
are still inside many of our communities, inside of a lot of the behaviors that we carry out. They're still there. And somebody has to, that damage has to be repaired, and somebody has to pay for that damage. And we say that if you go to work tomorrow or this coming week, and your boss decides not to pay you the following week, you may be unhappy. I know I would. I'd be pissed. We should be pissed. We should be more than pissed. Fannie Lou Hamer said we should be sick and tired of being sick and tired. Because that happened to us not for 1 week. That happened to us for over 300 years, that we were never paid. This question of reparations, I think through the efforts of comrades like Brother Winbush and other organizations throughout this country, throughout the world now, because it's picking up. But this question has to be on the forefront of our people, our minds. It has to be, whenever we vote for an elected official, if he can't defend our demands for reparations, then he has no position. It should be from our class interests. He has no right to an elected office. If he's not putting forth a demand for reparations because it's a righteous and justice demand. It's not something that just happened as a result of 1 million men getting together in Washington, D.C. a few years ago. Reparations is something that has been happening, like I said, ever since we were forced on slave ships against our will. There's throughout our history in this country, there's been historical demands made, not through people who had the benefit of the internet, who had quote unquote a modern education, but these were made by people who were still chained, people who were still working under the whip of the slave master. Our people still had the courage and the fortitude to fight for what was rightfully theirs. They know they went out those fields from Kansas City in the morning till Kansas City at night, and they were entitled to be paid for that. But we never were. So this demand itself is an age-old demand. In the early 1700s, in colonial America, a slave, a sister by the name of Belinda, we have a book that highlights her cause here today. For those who are going to get into drawing, you may read that book that Professor Winbush wrote. But this sister in the 1700s petitioned for reparations, and this sister worked in a slave situation. I think it was up in Maine. She worked on somebody's plantation. She came here from the Caribbean islands. And she worked for the slave master. He passed away, and then you know how the story goes. If he passes away, then that property, his property, slave property, become the property of his son, whoever he bequeathed it to. So this man's son became Belinda's owner, and then he moved out of the United States. I think he moved to Canada, and at which time he passed away in Canada. And I think Belinda's original owner told the son that upon his death, that Belinda was to be given her freedom. I think it goes something like that. Okay, yeah. As I messed up, the professor cleaned it up. But anyway, she petitioned for her rights for restitution and for her unpaid wages as a result of working in the Caribbean and working in the United States, and she won her case. David Walker, who also lived in the 1700s, he wrote a book called David Walker's Appeal. And in that book, it's a very short book, but David Walker was calling for the slaves to stand up and fight back against this stuff. He was calling for rebellion. But in the process of writing, David Walker made the comment, said the greatest riches in all of America has arisen from our blood and our tears. So he understood that economic relationship between what he was doing and how it wasn't benefiting us, but it was benefiting the ruling class of this country. In 1841, you guys have heard of this guy in the last recent years, Solomon Northup. Anybody, is that name familiar to anybody? Solomon Northup? 12 years a slave. Yes. So he's another one that sued the United States government. He wasn't successful in winning his case, but in 1848, and these are all people that they didn't go to the universities, they didn't go to school. Most of them were trying to steal an education because education was systematically denied from us, denied to African people at that time. So they were under the cover of darkness trying to learn to read and write and put some efforts together to challenge that system. But this guy, John Lewis, was born in Philadelphia as a free slave, as a free man, free person, in Philadelphia. And he had a job on a whaling ship. And he was captured while at sea, taken to Africa, and then sold into slavery. And he petitioned the government of the United States, for reparations, and he was granted $2,000, which may not seem like a lot of money, in these terms, but $2,000 then was a quite tidy sum, as they say. In 1897, after the so-called emancipation of our people, after our people were freed, a National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Association was formed by Isaiah Dickerson and Callie House. Now, Callie was a slave woman who worked as a washerwoman, had 5 children. And Isaiah Dickerson, he was an educator, so he had some formal education. But they had the wherewithal to form this organization of ex-slaves. And slaves, free people at that time, but still just a few years short of slavery, they had paid 25 cents to join this organization and paid 10 cents for monthly dues. Now you can imagine coming up with 10 cents a month was a struggle. It doesn't seem like a whole lot, but it was a struggle. But our people saw the necessity of this. And this organization had over 300,000 members. And they weren't able to use Google and the internet to do their membership and have, they did this just through word of mouth, just through visiting, running the risk of the paddy rollers, the policemen catching them and asking why are you, because Jim Crow was still in effect. So black people, Sister House, Callie House, ran the risk of being beaten upside the head, knocked upside the head every time she attempted to get some relief for the ex-slaves. This organization, and I'm reminded of this just by the name, National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief and Bounty Society. They were suing the government for pensions. They were looking at their pensions as reparations. But this name kind of piqued my interest because here locally we have a similar organization, and the time frame matches. It was called the Laboring Sons organization here locally. And what they did, they went around for people that were shut in, people that couldn't afford hospital, people that couldn't afford a burial. This local organization aided them and provided, the monetary resources that any person would need at the time. But it just shows you the disdain locally for our people, that our people had, let's see, 2 blocks? No, 3 blocks? 3 blocks east of here, they had a Laboring Sons cemetery. And the city, as we found out that they've done on numerous occasions around here, wherever there were remains, burial grounds of African people, they just covered it over and made a park out of it, put a park there. And then later, based on the efforts of, I see the sister here right now, her father, Willie Mahone, and a couple of other attorneys brought the situation to the attention of the community, and the place was later turned back into a cemetery in honor. The bodies and the tombstones aren't there, but the land, the area is a sacred area right now in recognition of African people that were buried there. But to bring us up to more modern times, in 1968, the Republic of New Africa, called RNA, they, following Malcolm X gave a speech in Detroit in '68, and right after that formation, the Republic of New Africa was created under the leadership of the Milton brothers, Henry brothers. Robert Henry, I believe, and I know them by the African name, Obadiah. He was the president of the provisional government of Africa here in the United States. You have another, and they were petitioning for reparations. You also have the National Black United Front, which is a coalition of individuals and organizations working to benefit Africans of all descent, of represented people of African descent. This Black United Front has been around for quite a while. And I'm just mentioning these are, the modern examples of reparations. Founded in 2015, the Reparations Working Group is comprised of coming to the table members. And I'm not familiar with that group, but they're out of Harrisonburg, Virginia. Just to show you that this question of reparations is not isolated. Formed in 1968, the Institute of the Black World, an Atlanta and Baltimore-based organization led by Brother Ron Daniels, had done lifelong work in the area of reparations. And they're still doing reparations work. We all know about the movement for Black Lives. They demand reparations for past and continuing harms to our people. The Jamaican National Reparations Commission, I'm not sure when they came into existence, but I know they've been doing tremendous work in the Caribbean, in the United States, and throughout Europe. The CARICOM Reparations Commission. CARICOM is a Caribbean Community and Common Market, represents 15 countries in the Caribbean who are also doing reparations work. Another organization that is probably leading the reparations charges today is the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparation in America. The acronym is NCOBRA. And they were headquartered initially out of Washington, D.C. They again are a mass-based coalition of organizations and individuals organized for the sole purpose of obtaining reparations for African descendants in the United States. They were founded in 1987 to broaden their base of support, and to encourage this discussion around reparations and bring people in, because if we don't push it, you can bet your senator or your congressman is never going to do it. So it has to be from us. It has to be a mass organization of black people. And I know some white people are doing it too. I know Professor Winbush takes offense to that in his book, but I believe. But I know some white folks that are pushing the cause for reparations. And COBRA has chapters, members, and affiliates throughout the U.S., throughout Africa, Europe, Central South America, and the Caribbean. And when we look, because after slavery was abolished in the late 1700s by the British, slavery continued for over 100 years into South America. So that's why in South America you have more Africans in South America, Brazil primarily, than any other place in the world. Another organization that indoctrinated me into this reparation question was the African People's Socialist Party. And I'm an ex-member of that, but we have a 14-point platform of what we want and what we believe, and it speaks to the colonial domination and oppression and exploitation of African people in the United States and throughout the world. Point number 14 states, we want the U.S. and the international European ruling class and state to pay Africa and African people for the centuries of genocide, oppression, and enslavement of our people. We believe that the U.S. and European civilizations were born from and are presently maintained by the horrendous theft of human and material resources from Africa and its people. The resources, real quick. This phone, some of you may remember when cell phones first came out, they had apparently two hands, they were that big. But a mineral called coltan that's found, 80% of it is found in the Congo. 80% of it. But the Congo for the last 15 years have been undergoing a civil war that has resulted in the murder of millions of Africans, and we don't even know it, do we? But that's happening to us. That's happening to us. We have to do something about that. But we believe that the theft of the resources, both material and human, from Africa and African people must be accounted for. Without reading the entire shorten it up. We believe that African people are due reparations, just economic compensation, billions of dollars which must be paid to the Organization of African Unity or other legitimate international organizations of African people for equitable distribution for the development of Africa and African people wherever they reside. We also believe that reparations must be distributed to the various independent African states dispersed throughout the world, and to the legitimate representatives of African people forcibly dispersed throughout the world who have not yet won liberation. So that's what I came into my understanding of reparations through that statement there. And I would hope that it doesn't have to become a passion, it becomes a mission that we pass along to our family members, to children, and also that they can take up this cause, because as slow as it's going right now, it might be a couple of weeks before we get reparations. We have to build this thing up. But through the efforts of these organizations, we're going to get it a lot sooner, probably than what we realize, and through the efforts of the courageous brother Raymond Winbush. So I'm going to turn it right now over to Brother Mallett.
I come to offer you peace. Again, greetings from our ancestors. Baragani. Oh, yeah, educate ourselves. That's okay. We'll get there.
And Jay Masati.
See, we speak very different dialects, but all of them are always treated in the form of peace. Our people have always been peaceful people. We have to understand that when we greet each other, it's always in this form. So I've been elected to give the introduction to our esteemed guest speaker today. We're glad that he had agreed to come here. I don't know whether he has been familiar with Frederick before coming here. But we want to put Frederick on the map. We're trying to turn things up here in Frederick. And we are happy to see the amount of people that dedicate themselves to coming today. And when you leave here today, make an effort to tell everyone who you meet, your family, your friends, your co-workers, whoever it may be, who have an interest in the upliftment of our people, that things are jumping off here in Frederick, as well as other areas of Maryland and other areas of the country. But, you know, we're all in the same state, regardless of whether we're in New York, whether we're in D.C., whether we're in L.A., whether we're in Dallas, St. Petersburg, Florida, Tampa, Florida, we're all in the same state. So we all need to understand that the only way to get out of this condition is to come up and rise up as a people and stand and demand for the things that we need. All right, so we said Sons of Reawakening welcomes Dr. Raymond Winbush, a research professor and director of the Institute of Urban Research at Morgan State University. Dr. Winbush received his BA degree in psychology from Oakwood University and earned both his master's and PhD in psychology from the University of Chicago. Having received numerous teaching awards, he has taught at Oakwood, Alabama A&M, Vanderbilt, and Fisk universities. He is also the recipient of numerous grants, including the Kellogg Foundation to establish a national dialogue of race. He is the author of numerous articles and has published 3 books. The Warrior Method, A Parent's Guide to Rearing a Healthy Black Boy, Should America Pay? Slavery and the Raging Debate and Reparations in Belinda's Petition, A Concise History of Reparations for the Transatlantic Slave Trade. Dr. Winbush has lectured in Europe, Australia, South America, throughout the United States, Africa, and the Caribbean on the contributions of Africans to world culture. Dr. Winbush has made appearances on the Oprah Winfrey Show, CNN, BET, and CBS. And I just want to add that because I was looking at scanning through YouTube a couple of weeks ago, and he was also did a fiery lecture with Rock Newman on WHUT, Howard University Station. So Brother has been doing a lot of work, putting in work, making it known that we are demanding reparations, and we do need to make that demand much louder than what we hear across the country. A former board member of the National Council for Black Studies. He is currently sits on the editorial board of the Journal of Black Studies. Sons of Reawakening applauds Dr. Winbush on the works he continues to do for the advancement of African people around the world and our fight for reparations. Everybody stand up, give applause for Dr. Winbush.
How's everybody? Okay. I've been on the road. Just got back from Chicago. I'm going to actually, this is the first presentation. I got back yesterday. And this is the first presentation I've made since being back. So I'm going to let you guys in on a secret that you can't tell anybody. Thursday night, I was in Chicago. I got to tell this whole story. It won't take but a few seconds, okay? I keynoted the International Black Film Festival in Nashville, Tennessee back in September. And when I was introduced, because I had started this thing when I was teaching at Fisk University in Vanderbilt. And when they introduced me, the sister that introduced me, she said, Dr. Winbush didn't know that he has had a great influence on Hollywood. And that's the only great influence I've had on Hollywood, buying movie tickets. So I didn't know what she was talking about. So then she said, one of his students was a man named Charles King. And so that's a fairly common name. But I remember when she said that I had taught a student at Vanderbilt 25 years ago named Charles King. He had, over the years, and he was one of these kind of nerdy students. You ever see like a nerdy, so they follow you around. And he had real thick glasses and everything. Nothing wrong with having thick glasses, but he said, well, Ray, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do? And I told him that what I would do was make movies, because you can teach African people more on the big screen. And we go to see Tyler Perry, right? Y'all seen Tyler? Y'all know who Tyler Perry is? How many of you seen a Tyler Perry movie? Okay, y'all seen it. Okay. I went to see the one the other day called, what's this new one out with Taraji Henson? Y'all see that one?
Yes.
That was deep, wasn't it? That's real deep, but we ain't got time. I'm going to get to Reparation, but I got to tell you the story. So anyway, the Charles King that I had taught at Vanderbilt 25 years ago is the same Charles King that produced, I'll just name some of his movies that you may have seen. Have any of you seen the film Thurgood, about Thurgood Marshall? He did that. He did Mudbound, which is on Netflix. He did 42, which is about Jackie Robinson. Denzel Washington, Fences. He had done that one. And Denzel's newest one, Roman J. Israel Esquire. Did you see that? So he was my student, and I didn't even know it. So a couple of months later, he called me. And I was at Morgan, getting ready to teach a class at Morgan. He called me up. He said, hey, Doc, how you doing? He's now worth $80 million. I'm not worth that. So he said, how you doing? So we talked for a long time. He said, I'm going to be calling on you to help me out because I want to do film. And he told me this 20-something years ago that he wanted to do positive films about black people. So I'm not dissing Tyler Perry or Soul Plane. I ain't going to diss those. But he has produced films that you can actually learn something from. So I said, okay, man. So, I was glad that we, hugged each other over the phone and all that stuff like that. So 2 weeks ago, I was sitting at home minding my own black business, and the phone call rang, and it was Charles King. And he said, Ray, have you seen the movie Black Panther? And I said, yes, I have. I said, in fact, I've seen it 10 times. That's no exaggeration. I really have seen it 10 times. But that is, how many of y'all seen Black Panther? If you haven't seen Black Panther, you must see it. I would never tell people, you must see, Wakanda forever. And so he said, have you seen Black Panther? I said, yeah, I've seen it. He said, well, you know Ryland Coogler? He said, yeah, I know Ryland Coogler. He directed the film. He said, what about Michael B. Jordan, who starred as Killmonger? The people that seen this know what I'm talking about, okay? And so he said, well, Ryan Coogler is kind of upset because younger people are associating Black Panther with the superhero, but not the real Black Panthers of the 1960s, Eldridge Cleaver, Bobby Seale, Huey P. Newton, and so forth. So he wants to do a film about Fred Hampton. And Fred Hampton, as you know, was assassinated 50 years ago in 1969 in Chicago, December 4th, 1969 to be specific. And I was a student at the University of Chicago 6 months after, Fred was assassinated. So this past Thursday night, and that's what this first slide is, that's Ryan Coogler. And we had dinner with him and Cynthia and I had dinner with him and his lovely wife, Zinzi. And, he's only 31 years old and made the biggest film in history, The Black Panther. So we met and I'm consulting for the film that he's about to make on the assassination of Fred Hampton. So y'all ain't supposed to tell nobody what I just told you, So he's a really nice guy, his wife, and we just talk like we knew each other forever. And he's producing the film along with Charles King. And Sasha King, no relation to Charles, will be the director. And the guy who will be playing Fred Hampton, I ain't supposed to be telling y'all nothing. Because I know everybody's gonna leave here and call police and open the house. But anyway, the guy that played, did you see the film Get Out?
Yes.
You know the guy that played brother, what's his name, Daniel Aluya. He's going to be playing Fred Hampton. So it's really, and so just to be with these young folks, 30-something years old, and they making these incredible movies, and we're going to hijack Hollywood. That's our goal. We're going to try to make movies beside, and again, no disrespect, Tyler Perry, but teacher, there's so many stories that we have to tell. Ida B. Wells, his County House, who was just mentioned by Brother Watu, all of these people. Okay, that's what I had to say about that. So y'all know that. So stay tuned for Fred Hampton and the real Black Panther that he was. Okay, I bring you greetings. First of all, I'd like to thank Brother Watu, Malik, and Michelle for inviting me up here. We had postponed this a couple of times because I've been on the road a lot. And in fact, one reason why we postponed the last was my 3-year-old granddaughter. I had missed both of her first and second birthday parties. And she probably don't remember, but Granddad, you don't ever come to my birthday party. Like she remembers number 1 and 2. So I drove down to Atlanta to see her. And I'm glad I'm here today. The other thing, I bring you greetings from Morgan State University. If you like Denise Williams, y'all know who Denise Williams, singer was? Yeah. If you like music, we gave the world Denise Williams. If you like sports, we gave the world Leroy Kelly, the running back for the Cleveland Browns, my hometown, which isn't doing so well in the NFL. If you like business, we gave the world Earl Graves, the editor and founder of Black Enterprise magazine. And our greatest gift was probably a sister that graduated there from our high school in 1918 by the name of Zora Neale Hurston. Y'all know who that she is. Zora Neale Hurston. If you haven't read Their Eyes Were Watching God, you missed half your life. So I want to start today by talking about, this is going to be a brief introduction. And look, I ain't going to be sitting up here or standing up here talking by myself. If you have something in the middle of the presentation, just raise your hand. So this is like a class, okay? It's a class. So don't be afraid to interrupt or anything like that. First of all, okay, Give me, go ahead, I ain't gonna read it, keep going. That's reparations right there. That's reparations right there. How many of you would love to have somebody working for you for free? For free. And just imagine what you could do with one black person working for you. You didn't have to go to the store anymore. You wouldn't even have to drive, possibly. You could have them paint your house. You could have them grow your little garden so you could eat the food. And if you made some arrangement, you could have them go out and work for somebody else and bring the money back to you. It's called convict labor. We're going to get into some of that stuff. So this is what happened. Ralph Wiley is now deceased. But you got to really understand this. And you know, we hear the word reparations a lot, but we really, we worked for white people for 250 years without pay. Now, at the time of emancipation in 1865, approximately 4 million Africans were released from bondage. You know, most of us have our ancestors coming from the South. My mother came from Kentucky. My father came from Virginia. Did anybody, relatives, any people's grandparents come from someplace down south? You raise your hand. And if you come from Maryland, you down south. It ain't, when I moved from Tennessee and Nashville up here, somebody said I had moved from down south to up south. Because Maryland is a southern state. So even if you were born here, you were born in the South. So most of us have relatives in Mississippi, Alabama. When I was in Chicago this week, almost everybody from Chicago came. Okay, this is the first question. Good.
No, there's no question. Malcolm said if you below the Canadian border, you're in the South.
Right. If you're below the Canadian border, you ever know, black folk, we move straight up. Like everybody in Chicago from Mississippi, because they went straight up. I lived in Ohio for most of my life. Everybody from there from Alabama. If you go to the East Coast, like New York, everybody from North Carolina, Georgia, and South Carolina, we went straight north. Doesn't mean that people out of Louisiana, they went out west. Texas, California, and all of that. So we moved in so-called Great Migration. I don't have time to talk about that, but that's a great history to understand. So, I'm asking this question: should America pay Belinda's petition? Watu mentioned Belinda's petition was a book about a sister. I want to give her her story really quickly. Belinda was enslaved in Ghana, and she wrote. We know this because she wrote it. Actually, she didn't write it, but I'm going to tell you how it got written. And she was captured in 1712 in Ghana. She said the men that captured her, this is in her own petition, had faces like the moon. That's what she said, brown and white. And she said she talked about herself being on the ship known as the Middle Passage, that she was carried to the Caribbean and ultimately to the United States. Belinda was enslaved for 50 years. And on the eve of the American Revolution, her so-called master, Isaac Royal, she was in Medford, Massachusetts, right outside of Boston, about 5 miles from Harvard University. Her master, he was siding with the British, so he knew he had to get out of town. So he fled up to Canada. And when he fled to Canada, the 50-something odd enslaved Africans on his plantation in Medford, they left, because you know, the beginning of the American Revolution. And Belinda sued. And in her petition, she said, I want to be paid for 50 years of unpaid labor. 50 years. She sued. And he received the complaint up in Canada, Nova Scotia to be exact. And he said he was surprised that Belinda was upset with him. Now, he had enslaved her for 50 years. And there's strong evidence that she had been raped by him. There's no children. That she had been raped by him beaten her. And she said, but he was surprised that she sued him because he said that he treated his slave very nicely. And that's something. I had a big debate with a white professor once at Clark University up in Massachusetts. He said, he used the phrase, nice master. And I said, what do you mean, nice master? Well, some masters were nice. How can you be a master of human flesh and be nice? So I debated him back and forth. He got mad. He said, well, there were some masters that were better than others. What do you say to white people? Like, don't let me, I'm gonna talk about white people. Be prepared, folks, okay? So Belinda sued the state of Massachusetts. She sued her master, and he's still upset at her, and won the lawsuit. And this was in 1782. This is the first documented evidence that we have of an enslaved African suing successfully for reparation in 1782. I'm in the process, it's been a long process, of searching for where Belinda is buried. And we think that she was buried in what they call the granary, in the heart of Boston, about 70 feet away from another sister named Phyllis Wheatley. You ever heard of Phyllis Wheatley?
Yeah.
Phyllis Wheatley also, I've actually seen Belinda's petition. At the bottom of it, it has an X because she couldn't read or write. And we think, and are pretty sure, that the person who wrote the petition for her was Phyllis Wheatley. And she died 1 year, in fact, after the petition had been written. So I believe that America, in fact, I'm going to go further even, the world owes black folk money, period. They owe us money. And I want to show you why they owe us money. How many of you, I think, is this included in their package? Yeah, Ta-Nehisi. The Ta-Nehisi Coast. You've got to read this article. He wrote it 3 years ago in Atlantic Magazine. And it was just as powerful about how and why, in this one instance, he's talking about Chicago, why America owes us reparations. And I'm going to say why in a minute. So what are reparations? Here's the definition. In code definition, National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations of America. It's a payment or a debt owed to atone for wrongdoing, to make amends, to make one whole again, the payment of damages, to repair a nation, compensation in money, land, or material for damage. So it's not the reparations, and I get a lot of black folk asking, Doc, are you saying that they can pay us for what they did to us? There's no amount of money that does that. None. But what it does, it tells the people that have been oppressed, we feel that we have to start repairing the damage that we started. And I'm going to go into that later on. So it doesn't pay for what they did to us, but it starts the nation acknowledging what it did. So, reparations for African Americans have nothing to do with handouts. They have everything to do with the issue of justice. So here's some more facts. Compensatory remedies for people in the United States. This country has committed crimes against a whole lot of people in the United States, most notably the indigenous people of the United States. So here's some examples of reparations that have been paid. In 71, $1 billion and 4 million acres of land for the Alaska Natives, the people that you call Eskimo. 1980, $81 billion for the Klamath people of Oregon, another example of Native American representation. Lakota in 1985. And more recently, $1.2 billion for Japanese Americans interred during World War II. And that was under the president that paid that was Ronald Reagan. This idiot in the white, I said I want to say something about Donald Trump, but I know I ain't. We're going to get to him in a minute. It's interesting that if you read the history of how they rounded up Japanese people, I mean, literally, they had been here longer than Germans and other people, but the Japanese didn't look like white people. So they put them in internment camps, many of them died, they lost their businesses, crime against humanity. When you have a crime against humanity, there is no statute of limitation. You can sue somebody forever. There's no statute of limitation for murder. So if you kill somebody in 1980 and they catch you behind in 2019, you still can go to jail for a crime. That's a crime against humanity. But here is what a crime against, you have to have 3 of these criteria. Were black people, African people murdered and exterminated?
Yes.
Yes. Were they enslaved?
Yes.
Of course. Were they deported outside of their country?
Yes.
Of course. So that's just 3. Were they imprisoned without due process of law?
Yes.
They still doing that. Okay? Were they tortured? Yes. Raped? Yes. And in inhuman acts, you probably read this week that the father of American gynecology, his name was J. Marion Sims. There's a huge statue of him in Central Park. And they just moved the statue from Central Park to Brooklyn. And I know some people in Brooklyn, they're going to tear that one down. But J. Marion Sims experimented on black women. And that's how American gynecology was born and why it was considered the best study of black or women in the world. That's why everybody from France and England came here, because J. Marion Sims would take these enslaved women and operate on them without anesthesia. And you should read these horrific things. I called him in one article the American Frankenstein, because he experimented on black women. And so they just removed his statue again last week, I believe it was. So if we have 3 of these, we have a crime against humanity. Black folks, trust me, we don't have to read all this. We have all 9 of them. And then some, because I can think of some more. So opponents to reparations say, but slavery happened a long time ago. Why should I pay for something that I never participated in, nor my family members? And then I say this, that's me, had nothing to do with the detention of Japanese Americans. Believe it or not, I ain't that old. I wasn't even born during that time. But in '88, part of my taxes supported the $1.2 billion supplement. See, America, it trips me out in the sense that as a scholar, because America always wants you to celebrate stuff. Celebrate the 4th of July, wave the flag. You know, every year in Baltimore, they go down to the inner harbor, shoot off the fireworks, say, God bless America and all that. America likes to remember the good things about its past. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. But they don't want to talk about the bad parts of their history. So you don't hear anything about Sally Hemings. Y'all know who Sally Hemings is? Who's Sally Hemings? Glass. Who's Sally Hemings? Thomas Jefferson, who? Enslaved. Exactly. An enslaved girl, not an enslaved woman. She was only 14 years old at the time Thomas Jefferson started raping her. And I remember when I was moving from Nashville to Baltimore, I was packing, there was this story on TV with Nick Nolte who said about Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings said, the greatest untold love story that ever was. See, that's how white folks and the system of white supremacy distorts history by saying that Thomas Jefferson and her in love with each other. You know, and if you read Thomas Jefferson's love letters to her, he was in love with her. I don't know what Mrs. Jefferson was doing. She was probably knitting or something. I don't know. But she was up there doing something. So that's one opposition to reparation. And here's the other one. I heard black folks say this. But didn't Africans enslave other Africans? Shouldn't they pay reparations? So I've heard black people say, well, we talking about, white folks say it all day long, y'all enslaved each other, as if it was our fault. So what I say is that these people who ask this question, whites as well as blacks, some, they confuse the initiators with the collaborators and the victims. Those are 3 different groups. So I want to talk about the initiators, these Europeans. The Dutch, the French, the Germans, the English, the Danish, every place I go in Africa, and I've been there a bunch of times, it's amazing. In Ghana, they speak English. Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, they speak French. You go down to Namibia and Southern Africa, they speak German. In fact, the Herero are pressing for reparations right now. They speak the language of who enslaved and colonized them. So those were the initiators. And they started, the first Africans were taken to Madeira Island in 1441, and slavery wasn't officially abolished in the Western Hemisphere until 1888. So that's a period of like 400, I think it's 447 or 477 years where they're added up. That's when we say 500 years, that's accurate. And next year will be the 400th anniversary of the first Africans brought to the United States. And not too far from here in Jamestown. Okay, so those are the initiators. That's who started this mess. The collaborator, how many of you heard of this brother named Tippy Tip? A lot of people have heard, okay, a couple of people. He lived from 1837 to 1905. He lived in Zanzibar. I was in Zanzibar, which is right across the coast, right off the coast, I should say, of Tanzania a couple of years ago. And he's well known there, but he's well hated there as well. He sold our ancestors from deep into Central Africa. He would bring them to the east and west coast of Africa and hand them over to the Europeans. It's estimated that he enslaved or captured something like 300,000 African people. He was black. It probably was Clarence Thomas' great-granddad. That's not true. That's but he was an Uncle Tom, super slave, as I call him, a warrior method. He was not somebody that you would want to know. He is a collaborator, but he comprised less than 1% of those who were enslaved. In fact, there was no country in West Africa where most of us come from that was dependent on enslavement, except maybe Dahomey, which is now called Benin. And that was rare, but the idea that black people just selling us into enslavement, that ain't true. And the third group were the victims. So you have the initiators, the collaborators, and the victims. That's us. We were the descendants of those people. I'm going to talk about DNA if I have time. So our ancestors stole primarily, 85% of you in this room came, including me, came from West Africa. And the European blood occurred as a result of rape. I say this, and it's a hard thing to say, but all Africans in this country have a rapist in their ancestry. And that's a hard thought to think. I mean, just think about that. And they were sold, of course, in America, Caribbean, North America. So opponents of reparations say this: reparations are a racial shakedown and a government handout. Reparations have nothing to do with being a government handout. These drug dealers like Rush Limbaugh on the radio say things like, well, they just want a handout from the government or something like that. Not true at all. It's a matter of justice. So opponents of reparations also say, how do you determine who gets reparations? How will you pay them? Will you just send people a check in the mail? Some people you will. Purpose of H.R. 40, which John Conyers has been trying to, who is no longer in Congress, trying to get out to discuss the whole issue of reparations, has been in Congress. He introduced the bill in 1997, and the bill still hasn't come out. I could tell you some things about that, but maybe during the Q&A we'll get to that. So, you determine reparations by making a national study of the impact of a crime against humanity against someone. That's how you decide. Another thing, opponents of reparations say reparations are going to divide the races even further. Why can't we just leave the past alone? Can't we all just get along? I call that the Rodney King argument. See, you ever notice nobody answered Rodney's question? Remember when he said, "Can we all get along?" Somebody, you need to write a book called Answering Right. Somebody needs to, see, my answer is no. The answer, that's why nobody, he said, "Can we all get along?" That was all the book. I saw it on problem stickers, everybody. Can we all get along? Somebody said no. We should say no, because we haven't been able to. Still not going to talk about Donald Trump yet. So we have always been a nation divided on the issue of race. This ain't nothing new, what's going on right now. Charlottesville, Virginia, that ain't nothing new. It's all killing black men and black women. Nothing new about that. Having a racist president ain't new. It's just that this fool in the White House now is so overt. Ta-Nehisi Coates, there's an article he wrote about a year ago. In fact, it's in his new book, and it's called America's First White President. So we said, well, we know that ain't our first white president. George Washington was that. But he meant that Donald Trump doesn't hide his racism at all. I mean, he comes right out and says it. Remember when during the campaign when he said, "There's my African American over there." Remember that? He pointed to one black fool in the audience who said that. Okay, that's enough for him. So we've always been divided by the issue. If anything, reparation will help me. No, but my family came to America after slavery on Ellis Island. We weren't even in the country when it crashed. But you're now a citizen, which means that you are responsible for what this country does. So that's a stupid argument. So as an African American, I'm told to remember the Alamo, to remember the Maine, celebrate the 4th of July. We even have a Memorial Day to commemorate the dead. But when it comes to enslavement, I'm told to forget about it. This country does not want to remember anything about enslavement, anything bad about itself. So racial reconciliation is impossible without reparations. I get calls from white people who will say, "Dr. Winbush, could you come over here and tell us how we can be reconciled racially?" I said, "Well, you got to pay reparations." And they'll say, "What do you mean?" They just wanted us to say, "We forgive you for what you did to us." You got to ask, you got to do, it's like this. If I break the windows of your car, what's your name again? Leah? Akeem. If I break the windows of your car, and you know I broke them, and I walk up to you, and you know I broke them, so I said, "Boy, it's a shame your car, that this window's broken." And you say, "Well, you did it." And I say, "Yeah, I did, and it's terrible. Do you forgive me for it?" You'll say, see, you're going to say, "Well, I'll forgive you, but you need to fix those car windows." So if I come back with you and say, "Well, look, I said I was sorry," and you said, "Fine, I accept your apology, but you need to fix or repair my window." That's what reparations are all about. It's a matter of justice. And that's why there's mistrust between black folk and white folk in this country, because they haven't completed the process of reconciliation. They just haven't done it. So reconciliation applies, which is a metaphor. Two people love or conciliatory to one another. A breach occurred that disrupted the relationship. Husband went out on the wife, vice versa. The couple, because of their damaged love, wish to become reconciled again. They want to get back together. Racial reconciliation applies that one time the relationship between black and white folk in the U.S. was loving, conciliatory, that a breach occurred to disrupt this relation. And when I say this, white people get really upset at me, because it's true. There has never been a time when Africans in America and white Americans have been conciliatory toward one another. And so here's what white people say. "Well, Dr. Winbush, what about during the civil rights movement?" That's the first thing they say. I said, "What about the civil rights movement?" "Well, you know, Viola Louiso got killed on the road away from Selma to Montgomery. Okay, and then Bruce Cunder got run over by a bulldozer in my hometown of Cleveland. Doesn't that show that we have all loved each other at one time?" No, it doesn't. You know, my mother used to say, one robin doesn't make a spring. white people as a group, and I know some of y'all are mad, white people as a group have never been conciliatory as a group to black folk. Now we'll say things like, I had a roommate in college, and she was white and she was nice. Or my great-grandson just married a white man or a white woman or whatever. That has nothing to do with being represented. As a whole, you see America in Charlottesville, you see America with the killing of Sandra Bland. And I said a couple weeks ago, the American bullet killed Dr. King. It wasn't James Earl, it was the American bullet. And so as a whole, we have never been together with this country racially. And all Donald Trump does is reflect that. As racist as he is, 53% of white women voted for him. As racist as he is, and all levels of white, Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about it again in his new book. They're trying to make it seem like on TV, the only poor, white, stupid, white folk. He wanted all of the demographics. Wealthy white, some of these white folks that told me they ain't voted for him, they lying to me. Like, you can't find nobody that voted for Trump now. If Obama ran the third time, who's the line to get out? Obama ran the third time, who would vote? They lying. They did vote. So here is our racial relationship in America. 1619 to 1865, we were enslaved, so there wasn't no love there. From 1865 to 1896, Du Bois used to call it the Black Codes and the Reign of Terror. 1896 to 1954, that was right after Plessy versus Ferguson. That was American apartheid. In fact, if you read the history, in 1920, the most powerful political group in the United States of America was the Ku Klux Klan. That was in the 1920s. And 54 to 68, to Dr. King, he got shot. And we were struggling for civil rights. From 1968 to, you could push that up to 2018. Yeah. We still struggling, they still talking about voting rights. Here, there. All this gerrymandering thing, I ain't got time to get into that. So, Byrd and Clayton in their monumental book, American Health, say only 9.1% of our time, our meaning black folk, this time can be labeled free. We've only been free since the Voting Rights Act. And I can remember that. So hey, we ain't been free like, we were enslaved in this country longer than we were so-called free. So this is, of course, I'm ending up right now, and y'all can ask some more questions. The first step to reconciliation, racial reconciliation, is an apology. The United States of America should apologize to black folks. Now, some of you say, well, didn't the Senate and the House of Representatives do that a few years ago? Yes, they did, but and most of us have not read the whole thing, but at the end of it, it said, don't take this apology, I'm paraphrasing, don't take this apology as a vehicle for reparations. That's from the Senate and the House of Representatives. They said that. Don't do that. So they really didn't apologize. So it's like, when you reckon our car windows, if I said, look, I'm sorry, I apologize, but don't take this, you can come out with these windows that I put. It's the same thing. So the Japanese were apologizing. Bill Clinton apologized for the Tuskegee experience. Y'all know what that is. Withholding treatment for civil. But the United States basically has said it will never apologize for enslavement. And you know this knucklehead in the White House now, he certainly is going to apologize. So the second step, this fourth step, is investigation and accounting. The nation must then conduct a study for the impact of the crime against humanity towards us. They have not done that with John Conyers' bill. They haven't done that. And by the way, I'm hosting a national conference in Oregon on code from the 22nd to the 24th of June. It's free, not free. They don't want me to say that. It's open to the public, okay? And if you want more information, you can see me after. I'll tell you about it. So they haven't done that. The third step is actually reparations. When you, international law, UN recognize whenever crimes against humanity have occurred, compensatory measures must be made by the nation that committed these crimes. Germany paid back Jews. Did you know that Haiti paid reparations? How many of you knew that? Haiti paid reparations to who? To France. In 1825, you know, Dessalines and Poisson Louverture had already overthrown or kicked the French out of Haiti. And the whole white world turned against Haiti, turned against it. So in 1825, Haiti wanted to try to reestablish relationship with the so-called white European world. So France said the only way you could do that, you have to pay us $1 million a year for 125 years. Now that doesn't sound like a lot of money. It's $125 million. But this was in 1825 when $1 million really was a lot of money. It's a lot of money now to me, but it's still, they actually paid that money. Haiti paid their debt. Reparations to France of all people. Exactly. So I mean, but look, so every time something happens in Haiti, I get so sick of these news. ABC, the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere. They don't have anything over here. But see, we as African people have to connect dots. We have to say, why is Haiti the way it is now? And it's linked directly to a 200-year-old punishment of that country for kicking out white slave masters. That's why. You got to connect those dots. It's like in Baltimore where I live. Y'all know about Freddie Gray. Morgan's probably about 5 miles from where Freddie Gray was killed by the police. Sandtown, Winchester, where Freddie Gray lives, is considered as being the worst part of Baltimore, if you want to use that term. In 1934, guess who lived in Sandtown, Winchester? Thurgood Marshall lived there. Billie Holiday lived there. Langston Hughes lived there. It was the most sought after place in Baltimore to live. Now if you go over there, it's totally different. It's dangerous. But see, with we as Africans, again, I'm going to repeat this, we have to start connecting historical dots. Why is Sandtown, Winchester, one of the, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, one of the most sought after places to live in, but now is an inner city place where it's very dangerous to live? Why is that? What happened? And if you read the history with Baltimore, then you'll know why it happened. So we have to start connecting dots like this. And then the fourth one is optional. You can prosecute the wrongdoers. So the Nazis were punished at the trials of Nuremberg. Slobodan Milosevic of Serbia, he was executed for what he had done to the Serbs. And Augusto Pinochet of Chile was also executed. That's an optional step. So what I want to do is end by reading a passage from my book. This was a letter. This ain't no Willie Lynch letter. There's nothing wrong with Willie Lynch letter. This was a real letter written by a brother named Jordan Anderson. Jordan Anderson was living in Dayton, Ohio, and he had escaped from enslavement in a few years prior to this, and this was written in 1865. And his so-called master was Colonel P.H. Anderson, who lived in Big Spring, Tennessee. It's right outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. Now I want you to understand, Colonel Anderson, his former master, asked Jordan to come back to the plantation after the Civil War. You get that? You know, because you know how those plantations were after the Civil War. You ever seen Gone with the Wind? They were burned out. The South didn't have anything. Sherman had marched through the South, burned up everything. So he asked Jordan, who was in Dayton, Ohio, with his wife and children, could you come back and help us out? This is an actual letter that Jordan wrote back to his master. He said, this is what he said. I'm going to read it the way I think Jordan said. To my old master, Colonel P.H. Anderson, Big Spring, Tennessee. Sir, I got your letter and was glad to find that you had not forgotten old Jordan and that you wanted me to come back and live with you again, promising to do better for me than anybody else can. I have often felt uneasy about you. The black folk call that signifying. But he didn't say you must be crazy or I ain't stupid. He said, I have often felt uneasy about you. I thought the Yankees would have hung you long before this for harboring the Rebs they found at your house. I want to know particularly what the good chance is you propose to give me. I'm doing tolerably well here in Dayton. I get $25 a month with victuals, that's food, and clothing. Have a comfortable home for Mandy, that's his wife. The folks here calls her Mrs. Ann. So he was signifying because he knew his old master wouldn't call his wife Mrs. Ann. He says, and the children Millie, Jane, and Grundy go to school and are learning well. As for my freedom, which you say I can have, there is nothing to be gained on that score, as I got my free papers in 1864 from the Provost Marshal General of the Department of Nashville. And I found out in doing the research, that was on the campus of Fisk University, where I used to teach. Mandy says she would be afraid to go back without some proof that you were disposed to treat us justly and kindly. And we have concluded to test your sincerity by asking you to send us our wages for the time we served you. Reparation. This will make us forget and forgive old scores and rely on your justice, there's that word again, and friendship in the future. I served you faithfully for 35 years, and Mandy 20 years. At $25 a month for you, see, this is the accounting phase. You add it up. At $25 a month for me and $2 a week for Mandy, our earnings would amount to $11,680. That brother could add and subtract and multiply and divide. And that was a lot of money. Look, that's a lot of money today. Add to this the interest for the time our wages have been kept back, and deduct what you paid for our clothing, and 3 doctor's visits to me, and pulling a tooth for Mandy, and the balance will show you what we are in justice entitled to. See, this brother was talking about reparations and 100 and some years ago. He says, please send the money by Adams Express. See, this guy wasn't joking. I guess it was like Federal Express back in the day or something like that. In care of V. Winters, Esquire, Dayton, Ohio. So he had a lawyer, you know he was free then. If you fail to pay us for faithful labors in the past, we can have little faith in your promises for the future. We trust the good Maker has opened your eyes to the wrong which you and your fathers have done to me and my fathers, in making us toil for you for generations without recompense. Surely there will be a day of reckoning for those who defraud the labor of this life. Go to the Bible. In answering this letter, he ain't through. In answering this letter, please state if there will be any safety for my Millie and Jane, who are now grown up and both good-looking girls. You know what he was talking about, right? The first sexual experience of most white men on a plantation with black women. So you know what he was talking about. I would rather stay here and starve and die if it comes to that than have my girls brought to shame by the violence and wickedness of their young master. You will also please state if there has been any schools open for the colored children in your neighborhood. And you know good and well no school for black kids in 1865 in Big Spring, Tennessee. But he asked, he said, the great desire of my life now is to give my children an education and have them form virtuous habits. And he closes by saying, say howdy to George Carter and thank him for taking the pistol from you when you were shooting at me. From your old servant, Jordan Anderson. You know, I love that. See, the brother spoke truth. He spoke truth. And I think I actually spoke in Big Spring, Tennessee about 7 years ago, and these white folks still mad at Jordan. It was what, NAACP, they got NAACP there. They still mad. There was a white woman on it. I don't know why Jordan didn't come back. I do. And the white folks, the audience did as well. So I want to end there because I don't want to talk too long, but if y'all got any questions, just ask about reparation. Yes.
The money for the Japanese in World War II, how was that disseminated? Where did it go?
It actually was, it was given in checks of $25,000 to $35,000, and it was actually written checks. And the heads of families, and it was a little effort just to to contact people, but most of them got compensated. All of them, in fact. Question.
Okay, so that happened under Ronald Reagan. How did that whole thing start? Like, how did it get started and get put into place to where they were actually reported? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how did it originate?
No, the Japanese got together with a group of lawyers and said, we're going to sue the United States government. And it started by getting a bill passed in Congress under Reagan. And they won. We tried to do the exact same thing that the Japanese have done. The government has done everything. And I'm going to be honest with you, nobody's recording this, bro. But Congress, I gotta say politically correct.
You don't have to be politically correct.
So what?
You don't have to be politically correct. Just be honest.
Well, when Barack Obama was elected president in 2008, the Democrats controlled the House, the presidency, and the House and the Senate. They controlled all branches of government. And we had, and I'm saying literally, myself and several other activists in Reparation, we went to Congress and we said, will you then introduce a bill, will you introduce a bill to study reparations when you become chair of the House Judiciary Committee, because that's where it originated. He said yes. After Barack got elected, Nancy Pelosi, and this is all true, I mean, you can't look it up, but you know. Nancy Pelosi said that to convince Congress that he wanted to bring laws of impeachment and study reparations against George Bush for war crimes. And he wanted reparations at the same time. She said it will divide the country, especially because we have a black president. And Congress gave in to her. So we controlled, if you remember, the Democrats controlled the House, Senate, presidency from 2008 all the way up to the election of 2010, the midterm. After that, the Republicans got control. So Congress, the only way I can say it is he pumped out on us. Would I say that publicly? Well, I guess I had here. But we all knew that since that time, it's been a struggle. But that's how it's introduced. Now, quickly, you heard Watu mention it, that in the Caribbean nations have formed a group called CARICOM, and they are suing 5 European nations for reparations right now. I gave a lecture in Scotland a couple of years ago, and Africans from all over Europe got together in Edinburgh, and they have gotten together to sue nations for reparation. So the reparation struggle is still very much alive. But in this country, it's faltered because of what happened back in 2008. Yes, ma'am.
Well, just thinking about the Japanese thing and like, you know, for Black people collectively, I'm just thinking about it, or, you know, do you think that trade or like getting goods from like China or Asia plays a role into why, you know, they were able to, you know, give back to them as opposed to like, you know, Africans?
Well,
Do you think that's why?
that's a very good question. You know, I think, see, this is going to sound real simplistic. I just think the white world doesn't like Black people. And they tolerate Asians and people. You ever read anything about Francis Creswell? Anybody read anything? Let me ask this question. What percentage of the world's population is white? Can anybody just guess? 64%. 2%.
Less than 13%.
13. It's 8%. It's only 8%. So your 2% is the closest, but most of us guess high. Most of us say it's more. I had one white man say it was 80% white. The world ain't even close to 80% white. I mean, you know, the only place white people are left is in the United States, and in this, Maryland is a so-called, and I don't use this term, minority state. There's more people of color in Maryland than there are white people. Canada's more in the same way. White people are left in Europe, that tiny little part of the world, Australia, small part, and a few in South America. The rest of the world are people of color. And so what Dr. Welsing talks about, you should read her book, The ISIS Papers. What Dr. Welsing talks about is how being a white minority, and they got us calling each other minorities. They got us saying, well, I'm a minority. They're a minority. You should never let a white person call you a minority. That's another discussion. They respond to us more. Like Asians are like acceptable. If you understand what I'm saying. So you always hear white people say that, well, Asians are the model minority. You know, because they don't cause no trouble. They don't talk. Black folk talk every place we go. We gave the world Martin Luther King, Malcolm, Martin Luther King, Soldier on the Tree, Harriet Tubman, all of those people. We cause trouble. And what it is that Black people, not only in this country, but around the world, are always the moral conscience of whatever country they're in. If you understand what I'm saying. So I think the reason why first of all, they helped the Asian nations when they got, after they bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the white world helped Japan. The same with places like China, after the, you read the history after the Boxer Rebellion, they helped China. After the British had occupied, they didn't help Africa. They took from us. They're still taking from Africa. Especially in Ghana. I just read last week that France, I didn't know this, they extract $400 billion a year off of the so-called Francophone countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, Cameroon. They just extract because those economies are dependent on that. And I don't want to get into long, it ain't really no conspiracy theory. The reason why Gaddafi was killed was because Gaddafi wanted the entire continent of Africa to be dependent on an African currency. You see? And so they had to kill him. And he had the money to do that. It wasn't like he was just some guy saying it, he could do it. That's why they killed Gaddafi. And I ain't got time to get into that, but that's, so I think they felt that the Black world was too outspoken. They remembered Haiti, they remembered the Zulus in South Africa, all of that. This ain't gonna help these people.
When you also say that the price that they have to pay
It
is
was
a different price,
enormous.
it's a different price too.
I mentioned in Should America Pay, in 1997, a group of economists, sociologists, political scientists, all Africa, met in what they call the Ghana Declaration. They told up all aspects of what the European world had done to African nations, extracting minerals, gold, diamonds, materials like mahogany, you know, all of this oil, everything, the cost of colonialism, unpaid labor for 250 years, all of this stuff. You know what the amount was? $777 trillion. There's not that much money in the world. And so we know that, and they know that. So one of the reasons, this kind of answers, the amount is so enormous. It's incredible. If I ask you right now, how many Jews were killed in the Holocaust? Give me the numbers. See, y'all know that number.
45.
If I ask you how many Africans died during the Middle Passage, what's the number?
100 million.
1,000.
John Henry Clark. See, we don't know that because Jews have taught that to us. John Henry Clark relayed his story when he was asked that question. He said, we must begin the count at 50 million. Begin it at 50. Dr. Du Bois said it was 100 million.
And that's just coming over.
That's just coming over. Because you can't just count. We say, well, how many people on the ship? Like this idiot white colleague down at University of Maryland, Philip Kirk, that stupid book, and Skip Gates. Y'all know who Skip Gates is? They said it was 10 million people. You got to count how many people died from where they were first captured to where they marched them to the Dar camp. What's the book called? The Book of Negroes goes into this. Then you got to count the Middle Passage. You know, I just visited the African American Museum down in D.C. And if you go down to the bay, they show how the survival rate of those ships was anywhere between 20 to 35%. So if you started with 100 Africans, you might get 20 over. Then you got to also count when they got to this country. The first year of life, they had never seen snow. They didn't know what these people were doing about that. You know, you should read about Oladu Equiano's stuff, and even the stuff that I have in Warrior Method about the Middle Passage. So the number has to begin at 50 million. John O. Franklin, who was a historian, and one of my teachers in Chicago, said it was 60 million. And as I said before, Du Bois said it was 100 million. But see, Du Bois was like white folk. So I don't know if it was 100 million, but I would say it was somewhere between 60 to 70 million of us. 10 times what the Holocaust was in Germany.
Well, let me ask you this. And I'm
Ask
not,
this.
well, okay, so, what, has Africa ever done anything in terms of how many people were taken from them?
You know, yes and no. I mean, there's commemoration, like, some of you have been to Ghana, like, you can go to Cape Coast Castle and Elmina Castle, and you'll see things, but those things were written also by the United Nations. Some of my colleagues, probably the closest thing is that study that I cite, the Ghana Declaration in 1997. They've studied. There's all these rumors. I've heard rumors in places like Cote d'Ivoire where they will say somewhere between 40 and 50 million. So that kind of coincides with what John Henry Clark said.
Well, what I'm saying is, so, millions of people were taken from Africa, right?
Yes.
So, had these millions of people not been taken from Africa, say conditions may have been better, it could have been a whole different Africa. So has Africa ever like brought up the idea of reparations for taking from
Oh,
people? You know what I
absolutely.
mean?
Yes. can read about that. And see, let me just say, I think the reason why black folk went to see Black Panther, we don't know what Africa would have been like had we never had enslavement. I mean, what Wakanda is all about is a place. What if we could have shut the Europeans out? We had everything, gold, diamonds, rubber, everything, platinum, all of this stuff, oil. We would have been the place. And you know who knows that now? The Chinese. That's why they're recolonizing Africa right now. Chinese, I was in Tanzania in 13. I ain't never seen so many black folks speak Chinese in my life. What? Yes. I was sitting next to these two brothers, young brothers, like maybe 20, and they were, I don't know, listen, but you know, they were speaking Chinese. I asked them why you speak. They said they were preparing for medical school because some university in China said that before you go there, you have to learn Chinese fairly fluent. So it's still happening. Our minerals and everything are being taken out of the continent. And what to mention about what's going on in the continent. 5 million people have been killed in the continent. It's the worst war on earth right now. And you hear nothing about it. So we don't know. And I think the imagination of what Africa would have been like, I think, is captured in that film.
Well, would you speak some about psychological thought for black people here in the United States? You mentioned that. We can't think that we are in a minority worldwide, actually, even in terms of states and stuff like that. That notion.
Well, I think that we've been brainwashed. You know, and people say that. I mean, Stephen Biko, the South African activist, said the greatest weapon, not one of the greatest, but the greatest weapon in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. That's the greatest weapon. So when I talk about reparations, I think black folk need a lot of different types of reparations. I wrote this section on Should America Pay about how, for example, Omarosa, you know, she's reparations. It's mental. That idiot up to the sheriff of Milwaukee, Clark, he needs Ben Carson. Let's go home, okay? Ben Carson's crazy. He's out of his black mind. And so I think reparation, the damage that has been done to us, is not only economic, we know that. It's educationally, it's culturally. You know, I've heard black folk come out with I was at this festival, and some black folk, it was kind of a middle class, bougie thing. And brothers came out drunk. You know, this real bougie. I'll tell you, Jack Hills, I hope I don't have Jack Hills. But Jack Hills, this brother was sitting there, so primitive. And I said, what do you mean it's primitive? That's us. He said, man, this is Jack Hills. If Aretha had been singing R-E-S-P-E-C-T, he would have been patting his foot like everybody else. But see, we don't associate Aretha's melody with Africa. We don't associate the blues with Africa. Or we don't associate any of our culture with Africa, because it's been robbed. When I was a young boy, thousands of years ago, the term rock and roll meant black music. Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, who else was back then? Little Richard. So then white people took that over and made Elvis the king of rock and roll. And they said, well, y'all don't call your music rock and roll anymore. You call it R&B. You see, and then they created this category, which I still haven't figured out, pop music. And pop music, they made Michael Jackson the king of that. And see, our minds are, I'm a psychologist by trade, our minds have been warped. Let me give you a good example. Just quickly, name 3 classical music composers. Just name them. Yeah. Beethoven, give me another. Bach, Mozart. Why didn't anybody say Coltrane, Miles Davis together. What is classical music? What is classical music? What is classical music? See, you thought you knew when I said name classical music, because your mind said, well, I'm jumping over to the black and I'm going to the white folks in Europe. And I ain't trying to diss anybody, but with classical music, all cultures have classical music. All cultures, Chinese, Japanese, African people, is music that will be here a long time and will be listened to for years and years to come. It's classic. So Beethoven, Mozart, they are classical, but they're European classical. We have our classical music, which is jazz. I think some of what Prince, I think when he said Little Red Corvette, that's classic. You don't know that song? Yeah. I think that, I mentioned respect. Classical music is music that will be here a long time. But see, we drive down the street, we turn it on the classical red, and the white people are telling us in our head, classical music means Mozart. And we say, yeah, that sounds about right. And it doesn't necessarily mean Mozart. That's a long answer to the question, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question with the of education. I'm wondering what you would teach the young Black America for education.
Well, it's a struggle. I mean, I teach at Morgan State at HBCU, and I see, for me, education starts in the womb. I'm talking about Black folk. When a woman is pregnant, it starts there. It's making sure you put the right thing in your body. That's education. We shouldn't expect out of the United States public school system that our children will be educated. And as I always tell Black parents when they come to work, they'll ask me, I'm trying to decide if my child should go to HBCU or, a white school. I say this, you can get trained at a white school. You'll get educated at a Black school. And there's a difference between, you can train a dog or train a seed. And I'm not saying if you went to a white school, you all jacked up, but look at where our leadership came from. Black collar, Du Bois, Nikki Giovanni, Toni Morrison. Kwame, he graduated from Lincoln University right up here in Pennsylvania. Samuel L. Jackson, Morehouse. And I could go, if I started naming the list, it'd be too much. But that's where leadership is trained. And I think at the K through 12 level, I outline all of this in the Warrior Method here about how do you raise a Black child. It is cultural. See, if I walk, and your house should reflect that. I can go, if I go into your house and I see George Washington hanging up on the wall, and I see you got, you playing, ain't nothing wrong with playing Mozart, Beethoven, none of that. But if I look at your record collection, ain't nothing but white folks, Beach Boys. See, I think our houses, what we do should reflect who we are. Donald Trump walked out of the White House right now with this on, red, black, and blue. You see, he's out of his mind. Those are Black liberation colors. Marcus Garvey did that. But we do that. I always cringe. I don't know if you ever seen justices in Africa, they'll wear the white wigs. That's a holdover for colonialism. What if Barack had come out of the White House wearing African clothes? And Michelle had locked her hair. Y'all would say, and they were a beautiful couple. But see, I think that it's hard for us to dream of a Black world. And it's easier for us to dream of a white world, even with regards to education. And again, I think that was why Black Panther resonated with so many African people. They loved it because they saw this might be what we would have been had we not been captured and enslaved. And our educational system should reflect that. And it doesn't. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
The work that Randall Robinson did many years ago, I haven't heard his name mentioned.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Was his efforts ever archived for his?
Randall's a real good friend of mine. I saw him at, you know where he lives now? He left America. No, St. Kitts. He wrote a book called Quitting America. He quit this country. He and I did a workshop in Toronto, Canada about 15 years ago. He said, "Ray, I'm getting ready to leave the country." I said, "Where you going, man?" He said, "I'm going to St. Kitts because his wife, Hazel, is from St. Kitts." I said, "Man, you ain't going no place." He said, "You what?" He left and wrote a book, died for these and told everybody to go. So Randall's got papers that he's going to give, I know. And I'm sorry, in fact, Should America Pay, my book, his book was called The Debt.
Because I have not heard his name mentioned at all.
Oh, I
What
know
did
a lot of people. I don't know. Okay, Randall Robinson in 1998 wrote a book called The Debt. He was also president of Trans-Africa, and he was a strong advocate for reparations. But there's a lot in it. I mean, this was say you could give a workshop on reparations. I mean, Callie House, Queen Mother Moore. You ever heard of Queen Mother Moore? Queen Mother Moore, James Foreman. Yes. And I just omitted Robert Brock. Robert Brock. There's a lot of heroes and shit. Reparations Ray, not me, but the one up in Detroit. These are, and Randall, I mean, Randall was I don't want to say the first, but he was one of the, if you call it modern reparations, the document. Now Randall, I mean, he's a bud. He would probably tell me not to mention that because he's so humble.
Yeah, I know he worked very hard, very hard.
He worked hard for it, and then people didn't listen to him. We did, of course. And you should read his book to death. But Randall is a strong brother.
Professor Winbush. For those that are not familiar with Randall Robinson, his brother was a news reporter, Mac Robinson, yeah. He used to come on Channel 7.
WHUR, he had a brother that did the evening show on HUR some years ago. He passed away though. Correct?
Yeah. Max Robinson
Yeah.
was his brother. He anchored the news.
Yeah.
He worked at WHUR, but he also anchored ABC National. Yeah, that was his brother. He's very sensitive when you talk to him about his brother, too. Because his brother died of HIV.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, well, I don't want to do it.
I had a question. So for all of us who are interested in joining the fight for reparations, how can we get involved?
Come to the Cobra Con, June 22nd through the 24th in Baltimore, Maryland at Morgan State University. I'm hosting a national conference with COBRA, National Coalition for Blacks and Reparations in America. And I'm going to tell you, read books about reparations. There's a lot of books about reparations. When Randall wrote The Debt, and I did Should America Pay, there were hardly any books. We wrote those books within a couple of years of each other. And I partially named my book after Randall because his book is called The Debt. And I said, well, Should America Pay? And Belinda's petition. I'm not trying to pump my books or anything like that.
Yeah,
but a lot of us don't know our own history. I mean, 40 acres and a mule. How many of you knew that when what's his name? Sherman gave that field order on January 15, 1865. They distributed from January to April 400,000 acres to black folk. And the area, if you read the field order, was where, like off the Georgia Sea Islands, North and South Carolina and Georgia, you heard of Gullah people, all of that, Geechee Gullah, all of that area. In the field order, it said, under no circumstances should any white people live there. That's what Sherman said. white people control that whole area. Hilton Head, one of the richest white preserves. The only island that is not totally taken over by white people. And I was there about less than a year ago. What's the name of that? Sapelo Island. The only one. But the point I'm saying is that 40 acres, there was no mule mentioned in 40 acres. This says 40 acres. But when you gave people land in those days, it was like if I sold you a car, you would, like a Lexus, you would assume it had a motor in it. So 40 acres, that's where we get the expression 40 acres and a mule. But they distributed 400,000 acres, and on April 14th, 1865, of course, Abraham Lincoln was shot. And Johnson, who became president then, he said, all those 400,000 acres, give them back to the white slave owners. He was from Tennessee. So they took the land back from us after they had given it to us. If we had gotten 40 acres of mule, we'd be filthy rich right now. Or we at least would be middle class across the board. And so I would say read a lot, come to the Cobra convention in a couple of months, and just get deep into our own history. I tell my students, you should read 30 minutes a day, something about black folk. They'll say, that's a whole lot, Doc. I said, but you look at Scandal for an hour. You look at, what's that mess come on Wednesday night? Empire. I don't even give lectures on Thursday night anymore. It's going to be over by Scandal and instead of How to Kill It. What's that other movie? How to Kill Everybody?
How to Get Away with Murder.
How to Get Away with Murder. I ain't going to say that. I love all of them. I love my African people. Yes.
I just want to touch on where she said, what would you teach your children? So I'm Watu's daughter.
Okay.
And every weekend, every summer, we were dedicated to going to every meeting, every rally, every fight, selling newspapers, being pie. And we know our history. I should probably change things. But I wish that I get more and had my kids more active, like my father had me. We went everywhere across the country, every state, for every fight. You know what I mean? You don't have to ask me. Don't raise your kid to not know what to do when he's pulled over. It should be just part of it. You should know. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And see, it's funny, like what you just said, sister. See, white people celebrate their culture all the time. St. Patrick's Day, 4th of July, President's Weekend. I mean, they'll try to put Columbus Day on us. And we know, all of that. But we feel almost guilty. I've had people say, well, why are you doing that Kwanzaa thing in December? And they're skeptical, where's some Kente cloth? But then on March 17th, they'll be wearing green tie. And they're about as Irish as that lamp up there. They don't know nothing about Ireland. But we celebrate their cultures, and they celebrate their culture. Ain't nothing wrong with you having hot sauce on the 4th of July and making some clean meat, eating some clean meat. But we should be immersed in our culture. Marimba Annie says that the most difficult thing today, and she has said this for years, the most difficult thing for a black person to be today is an African. And it don't mean that you got to learn another language, but you should know who you are. Naeem Akbar, the psychologist, he did a study in Florida a few years ago, a black psychologist, and he found, I don't know if you know this, but white people outlive us up until the age of 65. We have short life expectancy. Up until the age of 65, white people outlive us. After the age of 65, we outlive them. And what Akbar found out in his research is the reason why he wanted to find out what is the factor that black people have that have longevity. Two things, that they were immersed in their black culture and they read a lot. Those are the two factors that he found that could predict longevity in black people. So it's almost like if we can get to 65 and home, and that's when you see all these young brothers, Prince 50, what, how old was he when he died? Michael Jackson, all these, you know, I read, what's that, Whitney's daughter. All of dying young. And you can say, well, it's their lifestyle. We just die quickly. But it's like if you immerse yourself in culture, eat right, exercise right, all of that stuff, when you turn 65, you home free. You good for another 30 years. So, you know, you gotta be here watching.
Professor Winbush, I think there's something significant in it, and I think we have to continually restate the significance of being African.
Yes.
Because I think within there, somebody asked the question about why was China, the Japanese granted reparations. Well, in your book, you know, there was that saying, you have a slim chance as a Chinaman or something like that. By Chinaman chance in hell?
Chinaman's chance, yeah.
Yeah, but, you know, because now they don't look at the Chinese with the disdain.
They laugh at them no more.
They don't laugh at the Japanese no more because, you know, you see the Japanese here, I'm a Japanese, I'm a Chinese, but we are African American. We gotta become Africans who we are and lift up Africa and hold Africa responsible for the dumb stuff that comes out of that time.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like when you go to Africa, and many of you did, that it's not like everybody there is that Hawaiian, you know. I mean, there's some people, can I have your jeans? I mean, I've been asking, where you get them shoes? Can you have those? But see, that just shows, like that guy in Nigeria, that Nigerian millionaire just built the largest statue of a white Jesus on the continent. A white Jesus. It was in the look at it. White Jesus, and he said because Jesus is white. See, that's what Bobby Wright called menticide. Right. Not suicide, menticide. And so I think that, you know, as a psychologist, I mean, I'm all for reparations, strong support of it, but I'm also for the psychological reparations that we can do each day to ourselves. Remember, uses the term ayuresa. It means the internal reparations that we can do through reading, through teaching our children certain things. And when I say K through 12, you got to teach your children at young ages what it is to be a little African. So by the time they're big, you ain't gonna worry about it. They do what they're supposed to be doing. Like we said, it's automatic. They'll ask you to go to the museum down in Washington, D.C. Mommy, I want to go again. Well, y'all going there in Cobra, Mama? You know, just they'll ask that. It'll be part of who they
I
are.
still think, and I'm sorry to stop you, but I
No.
had this discussion with my dad. We could find, and I don't know how we found them, meetings and just open discussions and stuff every day if we wanted to. But you have the Black Lives Matter, but they don't meet and they don't organize on a weekly basis for weekly causes. Something happens every day. But we don't, you know what I mean? I can't take my kids to a Black Lives Matter meeting every Saturday and go out and organize and educate people on the weekends because there are no meetings.
Well, Black Lives Matter, I could say something. We met a group of us from the I'm on the North American, African American Reparations Commission. And we met with them summer of, this is 18. We met them on 16 in Atlanta, and we got them to push the issue of reparations. That's how I got on that platform. But see, I'm gonna say this. I think that Black Lives Matter, they're getting too much money from white people. And that's not a criticism, it's an observation. People say, well, Dr. King took money from white people. Not like this. You know, and if whoever controls your pocketbook controls you. And Black Lives Matter, I think it's an evolving movement right now. And they're still trying to work out some things. I really like that. Yes, ma'am.
So I hear you mention about our minds and the impact that slavery has had on them. And I'm not the first one, obviously, to hold it, but a few years ago, I was like, I think we as Africans have post-traumatic slave syndrome, which I feel, what I want to ask you is, how do you feel you can address it to other Africans to kind of use the term awaken them to just better understand what's happened in their family, why history has affected them so, and how to make positive changes to.
Well, I try not to beat things over my, I teach young folk all the time. It's like the other night when I had dinner with Ryan Coogler. I said, we at the dinner, I said, Chicago was like the center of black nationalism. He said, well, I'm arguing with you on that one, because he's from Oakland. But see, there's a difference between the Black Panthers and black nationalists. The Panthers weren't nationalists. This is a real fine political argument. But I didn't start arguing with him about it. Because this brother's 31 years old, he's young, but he's brilliant. He's very brilliant. In fact, I think that what you got to do, first you mentioned a book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Joy DeGruy Leary. That book is powerful in the sense that it shows us how enslavement still affects us, but we don't want to acknowledge it. See, like I said, Omarosa's messed up in her head. I mean, I ain't trying to diss the sister. I don't even think of her brothers. Watch it in Carson. And what you got to do, I'll try to preach to people, and I'm preaching to y'all, a little bit. But you got to I always try to inject pieces of historical stuff, cultural stuff, and conversations I'm having with people, children and all. Like I just bought my granddaughter. You know what this is? The Camellia beads. So I'm sending her one. She lives out in Nashville. So I'm gonna send her one. I took a picture, of it and sent it to her. Just so that she can be educated. Send her books. My granddaughter's 13 years old. But I got another granddaughter, she's younger than that. And I'm through her mom, my daughter, I try to just feed them things slowly but surely, and they get excited about it.
So, for me, what it tells me is, in order to show someone how to be African, you have to be African yourself. So I think that's what my dad was saying. We have to be more African knowing ourselves.
We
So
do.
rather than preaching to someone, we just walk it.
Yeah, walk the walk. And see, when people say, what do you mean be African? You'll hear Irish people say, I'm Irish, I'm Italian, I'm Greek. And they'll say it proud, and they'll make, kind of joke about it. I think we can do the same thing. And the amazing thing about it, white folks love and hate us. They go up to Harlem, Sunday morning, they tour in Harlem. They love our music. That's why they copy us so much. They love they love to hear us talk. They love to watch us play basketball and football, and they like to see us dance because they can't do it the way we do. We have to learn to love ourselves. And I know as a psychologist, some of the stuff is downloaded into our brains. White supremacy is deep. And we aren't even aware of it sometimes when it happens to us. And white people know that like those two brothers in Philly, Starbucks, I listened to that white woman that called, because I don't know if you heard that on the news. She said there's 2 men loitering here, and the police, could you come out? Police said, yeah, we'll be there. And Johnson, what's his name? Jordan Johnson teaches at Morgan. He's on MSNBC a lot. And he said, look, cops have become the handmaidens of those people who are afraid of our black bodies. if a black man is there with a white woman, the white woman start crying, oh, you know, they immediately think it's something, they gonna arrest their brother. And I think what we have African people have to do, being an African just means that you're centered on who you are as an African person, and you're not confused about stuff. You know, it ain't easy, but I think it should be done because this world is so anti-African. You know, I went out on the premiere, Richard McCall, Black Panther. It was beautiful. I mean, my students and more, they sisters shaving their heads now. They want to look like, what's the name of the people in the Warriors? You know the name of the sisters, the Warriors. Yeah, they shaved their head. It was beautiful to see all these black folk dressed up. Wouldn't it be nice if every Friday in America, all black folk dressed in African stuff? White people get scared. They're organized. And you just said we're organized. That's all you said. You didn't say nothing else. We're organized. Nothing else you say. Black people are organized. We don't know what that means, but they're organized. I mean, and I think that's what happens when we start doing what we're supposed to do. That's why I like Kendrick Lamar's stuff, because he's not afraid of being a black person public. And many of us are. Okay, this is going to be the last question.
All right, well, it's more of a comment, so I think you're already this, but I think you had a great leeway to say that black people have to love themselves. I just kind of want to expand on that. True, black people do a horrible job of taking care of themselves. And what I mean by that is that I actually had the opportunity to be in South Africa for the past 3 months. I just got back from 2 days ago. And what I mean is that it takes you being outside of America to realize how toxic of an environment and atmosphere that this is. So when I went over there, I did not look at CNN. The only time Trump came out was when somebody asked me about them, and the conversation was very short. And I didn't want to waste my breath on him. But what I mean by that is that they allow me that time to heal. And black people need to do that because, like you were saying, that we have very traumatic lives and traumatic experiences. And stress does kill. So I think that's why we die before we're 65, because we don't allow ourselves that time to be healed, to take that time for ourselves. So I think I didn't look at the news just because I was allowing myself to be woefully ignorant. And I can't be that way as a black man in America. So when I stepped outside of that, I took that chance to reflect on myself and reflect on the power and the brilliance that we have as black people. And I think that we need to tap into that more than do sometimes. We get wrapped up into everything that's going on around us, and we lose sight of the true power that we actually have. So we kind of need to step outside of ourselves sometimes and allow ourselves time to heal because we are broken, and we kind of got to acknowledge that. But black people sometimes kind of sweep that under the rug, and we're expected to put on this hard exterior as if this issue doesn't hurt. I want to say that, sometimes you don't have to subject yourself to watching, like the killings on, the Philando Castile, the ultimate terror. You do not have to look at that. I think black people need to sometimes understand that we're a lot more powerful than that we think, and sometimes we have to step outside of ourselves and allow ourselves time to heal before we can kind of go forward and be our best selves.
Well said. I mean, I couldn't add anything to what you just said. It's absolutely true. Take time to heal yourself internally, because the damage that has been done to you, what we eat, what we do, the stuff that we take in about a lot of stuff, it's damaging. And it damages us psychologically, that you've been able to retreat. Who probably saw that?
I went to Cape Town and I went to Edinburgh.
How's Cape Town?
Oh, man. Well, America is trash. So that's kind of my overarching, and that was my first time in Africa. So I walked on the ground with my shoes off, and the ions and the chakras from the ancestors. It's real. So I had the opportunity to work down there. I remember my last semester at Baltimore, I graduated in a month. Praise God. So really lovely. And if you haven't been, I would encourage everyone to go there. That's where life began. It's not here.
Beautiful. Anything else?
Well, I just wanted to comment well, just to an FYI, like personally, I don't hear a lot of things that go on here. But you know, just to be aware, if you're not aware. I was reading a lot of like stuff on social media, especially with this whole Facebook thing. Seems like they're getting a little scared of like people speaking out about certain things that are going on. Like they are like tapping into Google and like even if you don't have a social media, they want to like hear things that you're saying and doing. You know, like I'm just like this is too crazy. But I mean, I know collectively, like say if you're having a conversation, and this has been going on for a while now, but like say if you're talking to somebody and something of interest that you were talking about, it automatically pops up on like a Google search. It's like, I didn't even search this, how is this even popping up? So they're listening to everything that you're saying if your phone is on and all that stuff like that. But like the whole social media thing, like people's pages and this and that are like being attacked because they might be like speaking on like certain like topics. Personally, I don't, you know, but you know, just it's just kind of strange as to like why, you know, they're really, you know, listening in their phone or trying to, you know, I just think it's kind of crazy.
Privacy died.
Yeah, right.
There's no such thing as privacy. I don't know if you saw that incredibly frightening, and it's true. I mean, the news, like these phones, you know, we all carry around. This guy took out the SIM card, you know, the little card, took out the SIM card, turned the phone off, went all around DC, you know, all day. And at the end of the day, no SIM card, no Wi-Fi signal, no anything signal. It was tracking. These are nothing but tracking devices. And I want to get clear. I mean, I've been in Facebook jail 5 times for stuff that I post, but I don't assume privacy anymore. Unless you take your cell phone off, take any electronic device that you have on. You know, you don't want to get paired up with the object of doing that. If you go to London, the average Londoner gets a picture taken of him or her 221 times a day because they're going to be CCTV cameras all over the place. So you got to realize we're living in what George Orwell predicted in 1948. The Big Brother is watching. So, yes, ma'am.
Alright, so from the questions that we passed out earlier, we wanted to see if anyone had any questions that they wanted to read aloud to Dr. Winbush. That way he can answer your question directly.
Or if they thought the question was answered at any point during the presentation. The questions that the strips of paper that you were given.
Please answer. In Japanese reparations. Congress answered.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Oh, do you want me to repeat, please? Oh, okay. It says, how do you see reparations being used to better our community? I mean, it's touched on it, but like if we had, the money that we deserve, or at least the equality when it comes to getting the stuff that we deserve. Having, a good sense of self and, just the willingness to be proactive and, creating something that would benefit the generations to come. Build schools, build homes, build whatever, build businesses in order to, create jobs and just use it in a way that would help Black people collectively for the economy, for their people.
Let me say this real quick, that first of all, there have been reparations given, or this is what I call a down payment. J.P. Morgan Chase gave reparations about 10 years ago to people who were enslaved by their predecessor bank, as well as the old Wachovia Bank, which is now Wells Fargo, the quickest bank in America. But they gave reparations. Reparations are going to come, and I think I've had black folks say, if you give black folks reparations on Monday, the Cadillac dealer is going to be rich on Tuesday, which again shows how we're brainwashed. And then I'll ask people in the audience, well, if you got, let's say, $500,000 reparations, would you go spend it on, you know, air, just go wild with it? Most of us wouldn't. We said this is a once in a lifetime thing. We didn't ask that of the Jews what they did with their money. So I know that it would go for the upliftment of our community. Some people are going to get crazy, but the vast majority of us will not.
Anybody else? You got a question? Yes.
And he answered it. Was Dr. Martin Luther King for reparations?
Yes,
He was.
he was.
It was not monetarily.
Yes, it was.
It's for these checks.
We see, you know the I Have a Dream speech that King made. Most of us have not read the whole thing. You know what part we remember from the prodigious year. What is that? I free at last, free at last. Read the whole speech, and he said we came to the government. They owe us a check, and we come here to collect.
He said check, yeah.
Yeah, and he also said that prior to that, he was strongly in support of reparations. So was Malcolm X. He agreed with Malcolm said. I mean, there was, most of our leaders have supported reparations. Most of them.
I would say, how do you make sure that your children are aware of such and such? Just promote in your household and make sure they know that when they go outside their door, be prepared. I didn't have a slip, by the way. But I just say it's so important, and I'm just so thankful to have my father raise me the way he did. And I just feel like I'm confident with my kids, but I want to turn that around, so next time we meet, like, I'm gonna say that I am out there and more active with my kids.
You've done a great job, society.
You are, she is.
And you know, and it's little ways, like when your children are young, I'm talking about 5, 6, 7, I ain't talking about 13, 14, 15. Play some John Coltrane in the background, some Miles Davis. I spoke to a little kid. I love speaking to little children. I spoke to a group a couple of weeks ago in Baltimore. They asked me, I read on the story about Ruby Bridges, you know. And you kids crack me up when you get to read the story. You can't even ask you a question about Ruby Bridges. Say, how tall are you? How'd you get here? What's that on your wrist? They ain't got nothing to do. So you teach them, like, for my children, I had them listening. My kids know jazz. I love jazz. But I like, you got, let them listen to hip hop, the blues, reggae, you know, West African music, Caribbean music, samba, all that stuff. We have such a rich culture. And a lot of times our kids have like narrow listening habits, narrow reading habits. We can expand them from the time they're born.
Because one of the things we did too, like the grandkids whatnot, sending them books and knowing their level, it may be a few levels ahead. So that also invites the parent to read with that child and talk about the story that's enfolded in that book. Our kids need to see themselves. They can't be dictated by a blue-eyed, blonde-haired person who doesn't look for, you know, when we're looking for our idols and our inspirations, we have to reflect ourselves.
Yes.
And that enables the children to have a strong sense of self, who they are, and emboldened in their culture. That's very important that children come up that way, because they're easily swayed. So we've got to plant that in them when they're young.
Any other questions? Any strips of paper?
We gave out almost 40 strips of paper, now come on.
I have one.
Okay.
It says, who was a U.S. Congressperson who introduced an HR to the bill to set up a commissioner to study the impacts of slavery?
That was John Conyers, who I mentioned about. He's no longer in Congress because of allegations
Is he still pending?
of sexual harassment. Well,
Is he still pending?
yes, we approached Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas, and she's carrying the water. Don't be afraid of white people. And I know people, I ain't afraid of, sometimes I think we should have, I'm really reflecting what Dr. Wilson said. Sometimes I think we should have a national conference on black fear. And black people should all get together and tell us what you're afraid of. And we have a lot of fear. Well, I might lose my job, my son's in trouble, my daughter's in trouble, I've got this illness, because we have a lot of fears, and we should have groups where we can just talk about that. We don't have enough healing places. We do more healing. We need to do more self-healing. Like the brother that just came from South Africa said, you can heal yourself in a lot of ways. I recommend warrior that one night a week you should turn the TV off completely. Just turn it. I don't care what night you don't. If you like Scandal or Empire or something else, take Friday night. Go yeah, just take. I think you got to do that just to be quiet. Sometimes we just need to be quiet. Don't do anything for 20 minutes. Meditate.
Any other questions?
I'm glad that y'all invited me. This was a good group, because I had a busy week this week, and this was really nice. So thank you for inviting me.
Somebody, you raised a question. I thought you build something we had already discussed, it's gonna be a secret.
Yeah, I wanted to.
Well, part of it, we just didn't want to have a meeting here where we had expert information and we go back home and, we wanted to come out of this with something. And the thing we wanted to come out with was to see if there was enough interest in Frederick to have a local reparations organization that could be tied into Cobra or some other organization like that. And we just to jumpstart it here in Frederick. You want to go
So we do have a sign up, or not a sign up list, but an interest list for this. As the event goes on, if you could just sign your name and your contact information, then we can get back to you. But we would definitely love to start a group of organizers who are going to work with in Cobra.
Well, if you think reparations is something that's worthwhile, if you want to hold those accountable for the enslavement of people, if you want to hold them accountable, if you're tired, sick and tired of being sick and tired, if you want to do something about it, we think we need to organize. Like I said, I came in to this reparation question. Brother Nami from Baltimore, we came in to the same organization. But the reparation question needs to be something that we talk about every day to everybody in our community. And this would be Frederick's contribution to it. We could get together, a group of us, talk about what reparations, how it's going to look like in Frederick as a part of in Cobra, or like I said, any other group. But I think in Cobra right now is probably the standard bearer. And we can agree that if we want to be part of Cobra, but we want to come out of this meeting with a list of people that think that it's worthwhile and it's something that's doable. A show of hands, anybody? We got a sign up here.
Shout out loud.
Don't be shy.
Shout out. So we just like to thank Dr. Winbush for coming out and educating us here today, and we thank all of you as well for attending and learning more about yourself and our fight for reparations, because it's definitely needed and very important. And we would love for everyone, or if you are willing to participate in a raffle, we are raffling Dr. Winbush's book, Should America Pay Off, today. And as you've heard much about the book, I definitely think it's something everyone needs to have in their personal library. We're raffling tickets off for $3 if anyone wants to participate, and you'll go home today with this lovely book, which I but yes, so we have a raffle.
Everybody stand up. It's been a long day. Check it out.
Stay out, stretch, exercise.
And everybody gets one other thing. This was when Professor Winbush and I started discussing this event today. He asked me at what level should he speak, and we thought this was probably the basic level. Because a lot of people's understanding is it's small. So we're going to start here today, and he's committed himself to come back to, well, at least one or two other times to broaden this discussion and deepen and improve our understanding on it. So look forward to getting all those emails bouncing from us. So, yeah.
Thank you, everyone who participated in the sign-up sheet on the Eventbrite. I know that was something new, but it's a way that helps us to retain information and reach out to everybody and stay connected. So please check your email, look out for more communication through Sons of Reawakening. And please also check out the beautiful art on the right side of the room. The lovely artist over there, and I definitely am going to check out the table.
Please, everyone, enjoy. Me or enslaved in the kitchen yesterday to sell the food. So we please take the time to try to purchase some of this. As Akila said, we have a vendor over here. Membership. Everyone look in their packet. We need members. We right now we're working with 4 of us, and whatever family members can jump in. Hats off to Tracy because she jumps in watching Methodist. Jumps in whenever.